Think your brown eyes are just ordinary. Think again. You have been told your whole life that brown eyes are common, the default, the unremarkable one. The eye color people settle for when they are not lucky enough to get something rarer. Blue gets the poems. Green gets the mythology. Hazel gets the mystique. Brown gets a shrug. But here's what nobody told you. Brown eyes are not the ordinary option. They are the original. Every human being who has ever walked this planet carried them first. Before blue existed, before green, before hazel, before any variation of color appeared anywhere in the human story, there was brown, and only brown, for hundreds of thousands of years. And now DNA research has gone back far enough to show exactly where they came from, why they dominated, why they still dominate today, and what the presence of brown eyes in your own face actually says about the people you descend from. This is not a story about being common. This is a story about being first, about survival, about a genetic legacy so powerful it still accounts for up to 80% of every human eye on Earth. Your brown eyes are not ordinary. They are the oldest thing about you. Brown eyes are not one option among many. They are the starting point from which every other eye color on Earth diverged. That is not a metaphor. It is the literal genetic history of the human species. Homo sapiens emerged in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago. Every one of them had brown eyes. Not most of them. Not the majority. All of them. The American Academy of Ophthalmology states it plainly. Around 10,000 years ago, every person on the planet still had brown eyes. Blue did not exist yet. Green did not exist yet. The entire spectrum of lighter eye colors that exist today was still thousands of years away from appearing anywhere in the human population. Brown was not a color that won a genetic competition. It was the only color there was. The reason goes deeper than chance. Brown eyes are the product of high melanin concentration in the iris, the same dark pigment that protects skin and hair from ultraviolet radiation. In the equatorial environments where early humans lived, UV radiation was relentless and year-round. High melanin production was not cosmetic. It was functional. It was survival. The genes that produce brown eyes were selected for and maintained across hundreds of thousands of years because they worked. Every other eye color on Earth is a departure from that original. A mutation, a reduction, a subtraction from something that was already complete. Brown eyes did not fall short of something better. Everything else fell away from them. Most people think of eye color as something decorative, a surface detail, the part of your face strangers notice first and forget second. But brown eyes are doing something. They are not passive. They are active biological structures performing a specific function that lighter eyes simply cannot match. The color itself comes from melanin, a pigment produced inside specialized cells in the iris called melanocytes. Brown eyes carry the highest concentration of melanin of any eye color. That density of pigment does two things simultaneously. It absorbs incoming light rather than scattering it, which is why brown eyes appear dark and solid rather than shifting or translucent. And it creates a physical barrier between the outer world and the delicate structures sitting deeper inside the eye. That barrier matters. Research has confirmed that the retinal tissue behind brown irises contains measurably more melanin than the same tissue in blue eyes. Brown eyes absorb UV radiation and high-energy blue light before it can reach the lens and retina. People with brown eyes have a lower risk of developing UV-related eye conditions, including certain forms of cataracts and macular degeneration. The melanin is not just giving the eye its color, it is shielding it. There are also variations within brown itself. Dark brown eyes, common across Africa, East Asia, and Southeast Asia, carry the highest melanin load. Lighter brown eyes, more common in West Asia, Europe, and the Americas, carry less. The color shifts, but the protective function remains. Brown eyes, at every shade, are built to absorb what lighter eyes let through. For most of the 20th century, scientists believe eye color worked like a simple dial. Brown dominant, blue recessive, one or two genes doing the work. You learned it in school. It was clean, memorable, and wrong. The reality is more layered, and it starts on chromosome 15, where two genes sit in close proximity doing something far more complex than a dial. Their names are OCA2 and HERC2, and together they form the primary control system for melanin production in the human iris. OCA2 is the production gene. It carries the instructions for building a protein, known as the P protein, that constructs and maintains the cellular structures responsible for making and storing melanin. When OCA2 is functioning at full capacity, the iris produces abundant melanin and the eyes are brown. When its output is reduced, melanin drops and color lightens accordingly. HERC2 is the switch. It does not produce melanin directly. Instead, it regulates whether OCA2 gets turned on at all. A specific region inside HERC2, located in what geneticists call intron 86, acts as an enhancer that controls OCA2 expression. When that enhancer is active, OCA2 runs, melanin is produced, and the result is brown eyes. When a mutation disrupts that enhancer, OCA2 goes quiet, melanin production falls, and lighter eye colors emerge. Brown eyes, at the genetic level, are simply what happens when the system runs as designed. Every lighter eye color in human history is the result of something interrupting that default. OCA2 and HERC2 tell most of the story, but not all of it, and the part they do not tell is where the science gets genuinely surprising. For decades, researchers assumed that once the primary switch was identified, eye color prediction would become straightforward. Sequence those two genes, read the result, call the color. In practice, it never worked that cleanly. Brown and blue could be predicted with reasonable confidence. Everything in between remained stubbornly resistant to clean forecasting. The reason, it turned out, was that dozens of additional genes were contributing to the final outcome in ways nobody had fully mapped. In 2021, an international research team led by King's College London published the largest genetic study of eye color ever conducted. They analyzed the DNA of nearly 195,000 people across Europe and Asia. What they found reshaped the field. The study identified 50 previously unknown genetic regions associated with eye color, bringing the total number of confirmed contributing genes to well over 60. Even then, the combined effect of all identified variants explained only around 53% of total eye color variation. More than half the picture, but not the whole thing. Additional genes beyond OCA2 and HERC2 influence melanin levels, iris structure, light scattering inside the eye, and the specific undertones that separate a warm brown from a cooler one. The 2021 findings also confirmed that iris pigmentation variation in Asian populations follows genetically similar pathways to Europeans, despite different ancestral histories. Brown eyes are the product of a network, not a single command. Evolution does not keep things around by accident. If brown eyes have dominated the human population for hundreds of thousands of years, across every continent and every climate where early humans lived, there is a reason. And that reason is written directly into the biology of what melanin does inside the eye. In equatorial Africa, where Homo sapiens spent the overwhelming majority of its evolutionary history, ultraviolet radiation is not seasonal, it is constant. Year-round, high intensity, arriving at angles that maximize exposure to skin, eyes, and every other surface the body presents to the sun. In that environment, melanin is not optional. It is the primary line of defense against a form of radiation that damages DNA, degrades folate critical to fetal development, and causes progressive destruction of delicate internal eye structures over a lifetime of exposure. Brown eyes answer that problem directly. The high concentration of eumelanin in a brown iris absorbs UV radiation and high-energy blue light before it penetrates to the lens and retina. The protection is measurable. Studies have found that people with brown eyes face lower rates of certain UV-related eye conditions than those with lighter irises. In high-radiation environments, that difference accumulates across a lifetime into a meaningful survival advantage. Natural selection kept the genes for brown eyes dominant across equatorial populations for exactly this reason. The people who carried high melanin variants were, on average, healthier and more reproductively successful in those environments than those who did not. Brown eyes did not persist because nothing replaced them. They persisted because they worked. Brown eyes held for hundreds of thousands of years because the environment demanded them. Then the environment changed. Not the environment itself, but humanity's relationship to it. Somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 years ago, a small group of Homo sapiens left Africa and began moving into territories no human had occupied before. That migration would eventually produce every non-African population alive today, and it would, over thousands of years, produce every non-brown eye color on Earth. Before the final reveal, One thing worth noting, everything covered in this video, the genes, the migration routes, the ancestral signals embedded in your pigmentation, all of it is traceable inside your own DNA results. I wrote the guide for exactly that. It is called Where Do You Really Come From? Link is below. Now, here is what nobody talks about. As those migrating populations moved north and east into higher latitudes, the selective pressure that had kept melanin production high began to loosen. UV radiation weakened significantly away from the equator. In northern environments, the survival advantage that made brown eyes essential in Africa simply became less critical. Genetic variants that reduced melanin production no longer carried the same costs they would have in equatorial conditions. They could survive. They could spread. What replaced the pressure for dark pigmentation was something different entirely. At high latitudes with weak seasonal sunlight, lighter skin became advantageous for vitamin D synthesis. The same evolutionary logic that allowed lighter skin to emerge also permitted lighter eyes to appear and persist in ways that would never have been sustainable closer to the equator. Brown eyes did not disappear from these populations overnight. They remained common across every part of the world, but the door to variation had opened. Every lighter eye color on Earth traces back to a single moment, not a gradual drift across many populations over many generations. One mutation in one person at one point in time. And that mutation did not create something new, it turned something off. The event happened inside the HERC2 gene, in the regulatory region that controls whether OCA2 produces melanin at all. A single nucleotide change, one letter altered in a sequence of billions, disrupted the enhancer that keeps OCA2 switched on. With that enhancer compromised, melanin production in the iris dropped. The result was blue eyes, appearing for the first time in a population that had never carried them before. Professor Hans Eiberg of the University of Copenhagen described it directly. Originally, he said, we all had brown eyes. The mutation affecting the OCA2 gene created a switch that literally turned off the ability to produce brown eyes. What makes this finding remarkable is the consistency of the evidence. All blue-eyed people alive today carry that same mutation at exactly the same location in their DNA. The variation within blue eyes is minimal compared to the enormous variation within brown. That uniformity points to a single origin, one ancestor, one moment. From that single mutation, further variation followed. Green eyes emerged through additional genetic changes that reduced melanin further while altering undertones. Hazel developed at the intermediate range, where partial melanin production interacts with light scattering in the iris. Every departure from brown begins in the same place. One switch, one person, one change that the rest of the human story inherited. When people say brown eyes, they are collapsing an enormous range of variation into a single word. Brown is not one color. It is a spectrum that runs from a pale golden amber that catches light like honey, all the way to a deep near black, so saturated it absorbs almost everything around it. Between those two extremes sits every shade of chestnut, copper, walnut, and mahogany that exists in human irises today. They are all brown, they are not all the same. The difference between them comes down to melanin load. Dark brown eyes, the kind most common across sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, and Southeast Asia, carry the highest concentration of eumelanin in the iris. That density of pigment absorbs light so completely that the eye can appear almost black in dim conditions, then reveal deep amber or reddish undertones in direct sunlight. The color is not flat, it is layered, but the layers only become visible when the light is right. Lighter brown eyes, more prevalent across West Asia, Southern Europe, and the Americas, carry a lower melanin concentration. Those eyes sit closer to the hazel boundary on the pigmentation spectrum. In certain lighting, they can appear amber, golden, or even faintly greenish around the edges. They are still brown. The genetic architecture producing them is still fundamentally the same OCA2 and HERC2 system running at full function. But the output is dialed to a different intensity. Geography shaped that variation. Populations that spent thousands of years in conditions of moderate UV exposure landed at intermediate melanin levels. The result is visible today in the spectrum of brown eyes spread across the planet. Look at the global distribution of brown eyes, and the pattern is immediate. They are everywhere. Not evenly, not identically, but present on every continent, in every major population, at frequencies that no other eye color comes close to matching. Between 70 and 80% of every human being alive today has brown eyes. That figure comes from the American Academy of Ophthalmology, and it represents something worth sitting with for a moment. 8 out of every 10 people on Earth carry the same ancestral eye color that the first Homo sapiens carried in Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. The concentration is highest where it has always been highest. Across sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East, brown eyes are not merely common. They are functionally universal. In many of these populations, surveying eye color produces results so consistently brown that variation becomes statistically negligible. The genes for lighter eye colors exist in these populations at such low frequencies they rarely surface. Europe is the exception. It is the only major region on Earth where brown eyes do not dominate. Northern Europe in particular shows the highest concentrations of blue eyes anywhere in the world, a direct legacy of the population movements and genetic mutations that followed the original out-of-Africa dispersal. Even within Europe, however, brown eyes remain the single most common color across the continent as a whole. The world did not move away from brown eyes. One corner of it did, briefly, under very specific conditions. The rest stayed exactly where it began. Your brown eyes are not just a physical trait, they are a document, a biological record written in the language of pigmentation genes that traces an unbroken line back through every ancestor you have ever had, all the way to the first humans who carried those same genes in equatorial Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. That connection is not metaphorical, it is molecular. The OCA2 gene running at full capacity in your iris today is carrying the ancestral allele, the original version, the one that was present before any mutation ever appeared to reduce it. When geneticists sequence that region of your DNA and find the variants associated with high melanin production, they are reading something ancient, something that survived every migration, every climate shift, every population bottleneck that your lineage passed through on its way to producing you. What is remarkable is what that continuity represents across the full arc of human history. The populations that stayed closest to the original African environment maintained the highest melanin levels because those environments never stopped demanding it. The populations that moved north, that mixed with others, that encountered new selective pressures, show the departures. Lighter eyes in those lineages are the genetic signature of distance, of movement, of change. Brown eyes are the signature of persistence. A 2015 study confirmed that nearly all participants of South Asian and East Asian ancestry had brown eyes, with minimal variation. The ancestral signal in those populations is essentially intact. Your brown eyes are not common. They are continuous. There is a difference, and that difference runs all the way back to the beginning. Think about what brown eyes actually are for a moment. Not the color, the history behind it. Every person alive today with brown eyes is carrying an unbroken genetic thread that runs back further than agriculture, further than civilization, further than any written record of human life. Back to the first people who stood in equatorial Africa under a sun that demanded everything their biology had. Brown eyes answered that demand. They have been answering it ever since. Science has now confirmed what that means at the molecular level. The genes, the switch, the migration, the mutation that eventually produced every other color by departing from the original. All of it points back to the same place. Brown was first. Brown was necessary. Brown survived everything. You share that with the majority of humanity. Every continent, every ancestry, every population that ever lived close to where the human story actually started. That is not ordinary. That is foundational. So next time someone tells you brown eyes are the common one, the plain one, the one without a story, you know exactly what to tell them. Brown eyes do not have a story. Brown eyes are the story, and your DNA has been carrying it the whole time. What's your eye color?